What's up, guys? So today on the podcast, we've delivered a double dose for you this week because after we were done doing the other podcast, I was like, man, that was just such a random thought that, again, it got into all kinds of areas. And I figured, so a lot of you guys probably, I kind of am too. It's like the coronavirus stuff. I'm just like, I don't want to talk about it anymore. So it's a little more lighthearted this time. We're going to talk about martial arts movies. I'm going to talk about the 80s martial art movie that inspired me, and how probably between all the 80s martial arts movies I watched and the fighting games that I played, literally this is something I've been thinking about. As I'll talk about in this, I really feel like that for some reason or another, this is what I was supposed to do, be a martial artist and be a fighter and all that stuff. I don't know why, but it's the only thing that I can look back on and say that was the thing that was always there as a kid. I dabble in other stuff, but I would always come back to this idea, and so we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about the movie that inspired me to get into training and to become a fighter. So hopefully you guys enjoy this podcast, and hopefully it entertains you and kind of maybe takes your mind off things a little bit, especially when you hear about some of the stuff's just silly. And guys, before we get into the podcast, I want to thank our sponsors. First one is Charlotte's Web. Charlotte's Web is the CBD that I use. I would say official CBD of the Jiu-Jitsu podcast, but of course it is, right? It's the CBD that I use personally, which has been a big help during the stuff that we've been going through, where I'm not able to train and get the same level of exertion out, and at nighttime it definitely helps me, sort of relax and sleep. And I've noticed that, again, just with anxiety maybe being a little bit more on the common side right now with everything being the way it is, it's definitely one of those things that helps sort of create a sense of calmness. So, again, you can check out their stuff, and if you want to, if you go to their website at charlottesweb.com and you get yourself some of their product, use the promo code Chewjitsu. You'll support the podcast that way, and you'll also save 15% on the order. We also have a sponsor, epicrollbjj.com. So if you've watched any of my recent videos or seen some of my recent Instagram posts, I've had some of Matt, he's the guy that runs Epic Roll, some of his shirts on, like the neon belly. There's a triangle choke one, and there's one with sushi rolls. But you can check out his stuff along with his rash guards, his gis, and everything else. We gave away one of the free gis during one of our recent shows. And you can check his stuff out at epicrollbjj.com, and you can use the promo code Jiu-Jitsu, again, 15% on the order. And then if you guys want to get some podcast extras and support the podcast, you can check out our Patreon. It's at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast for less than a quarter. It's the best quarter you've ever spent. So you could go right now, if you wanted to, you could go into a store. Well, you probably couldn't go into a store because that'd probably be not allowed at this point. But maybe you could. I don't know when this is going to air. But you could go into a place and you could put a quarter into a bubblegum machine and you get some crappy candy, right? You might even be able, I don't know what you can get for a quarter anymore, right? But for just less than a quarter a day, you can get some extra. I feel like this is like turning into one of those like infomercials for less than 3 cents a day, you can feed a family. For 23 cents, for 23 and a third of a cent, you can join the vault, or not the vault. I keep saying the wrong damn names. These are the worst promos, right? I love these. See, if you guys actually like listen to all these, you'll be getting these because these are like completely off the cuff. These are not like the normal like let me read from a script, which probably reading from a script would probably be the better idea. But I'm not going to read from a script. I'm going to speak from the heart.
We got the best promos in the game.
From my furry face heart where I need a haircut. Seriously, but for less than a quarter a day, you can jump into the Patreon that we have. Inside of that, we literally have like well over 100 pieces of content, everything from extra podcasts, interviews that have not been released with people. We have videos. There's a seminar that I did that's in there. There's a ton of stuff. Literally just a ton of stuff. You can try it out for a month and see if you like it. There's no obligation to continue, but you can try it out and see if you like it, cancel anytime. And you can do that at going to the patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. So check that out. And guys, one of the things that I've been promoting recently on the podcast, because I keep getting messages from people where they tell me, oh, I didn't know you do that. I run a sort of a Monday through Friday email. The emails can be everything from jiu-jitsu training tips to diet tips or weight training tips. Sometimes it's just random trains of thought that I think might be useful to people. Other times it might even be something where every month we do a Troll of the Month Club. Where I talk about one of the guys I've been trolled with on the internet. And I even share some of the books that I'm reading. But if you guys want to get those emails that I send out Monday through Friday and get some free resources, you can go to jiu-jitsu.net. There's a section on my webpage that says free ebook. You can click there. I'll give you a free drilling ebook as well well as a free game plan guide to developing your own jiu-jitsu, your own jiu-jitsu game plan, and I'll help you do that in those resources. You can get the emails. If you like them, stick around with me and hang out. If you don't like the emails, you can unsubscribe at any time. So with all that said, guys, let's jump into the podcast and let's talk about my favorite 80s movie that inspired me to do martial arts. What's up, guys? So today on the podcast, I wanted to talk about martial arts movies / anything that got you inspired into martial arts. So I'd really like to ask you the question while you're listening to this, just to kind of get the ball rolling. What inspired you to get into jiu-jitsu, martial arts in general, any of that stuff? I was thinking about this because recently I got a special gift from one of the listeners and viewers named Johnny. He sent me a autographed picture of Bolo Yeung. Now, if you're not familiar with who Bolo Yeung is, Bolo Yeung was he was a martial arts movie actor, and he was in movies with Bruce Lee and Jean-Claude Van Damme and all kinds of other stuff. And he was the main bad guy in probably what I consider one of my main martial arts inspirations, the movie Bloodsport. So again, if you haven't watched Bloodsport, stop what you're doing, stop listening to this podcast, and go watch that. It's free online. You know, it's funny. I don't like. Well, I went back and watched it recently, and it definitely is a little dated.
It gets so like. Do you cringe at the acting? You're like, oh, this
whatever,
is,
bro. The movie's awesome.
This is not as bad as I remember it being.
It's not. It's my childhood, but so I love it anyway. But it was a martial arts movie, and basically in the movie Bloodsport, if you haven't seen it, I think most people have, but if you haven't seen it, basically they take all these martial arts from all around the world and they fight. And it ends up being Jean-Claude Van Damme and Bolo Yeung. And Bolo Yeung was this jacked dude with like huge pec muscles. And I remember at the time when I was a kid, like him, like I loved Jean-Claude Van Damme, but him being so big and muscular, I was just like, thought it was so impressive, and he looked so fearsome. And I remember his pecs he would flex them on people. And I was like, I asked my grandpa, I was like, Grandpa, how do I get pecs like that? And he would say, you got to do push-ups. I'd bang out push-ups till my arms fell off. No pecs, no muscles. And then I remember I started lifting weights later on in life. And then like when I was a freshman in high school, 9th grade, I was able to move my pecs. I was able to flex my pectoral muscles, and I remember I thought it was the coolest thing. I'd sit there in like freaking classes just flexing my right pec, like
just one,
just one. This is all I could do. And then I learned how to do two, and then I just started like doing like Knight Rider. Look at this, dun 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 dun.
Would you say you're right or left pec dominant?
Probably the right pec. Right pec's definitely a little bit more.
I wonder. This is. I'm just wondering. What do you think is the most pec flexes in a minute? What's the world record?
No clue. I
bet. But maybe there isn't one.
I bet there's a record.
Why don't you go for it?
Yeah. You know, I know we were talking about like doing something with the coronavirus time. I'm not going to do that. But so you know, again,
that's not what you want to achieve.
That's not what I'm worried about.
All right, beat my record, y'all.
But you know, so I started watching that all the time, and then you know that inspired me to want to do martial arts. And I remember going into Taekwondo class, and I got my yellow belt. And which was cool, you know, did my little form, broke my little balsa wood piece of wood or whatever, little like board, you know. I think I could have like probably sneezed and the damn thing would have broke. But I remember afterwards, one day I saw the advanced classes where it was blue belts and up, and they were sparring. They were fighting each other. I was like, yeah, that's what I want to do, because that's like blood sport. I was like, they're fighting. And so I came up to my sensei. I was like, Sensei, when do I get to spar? And he said, when you're a blue belt. And I'm thinking like, blue belt, I'm a yellow belt now, so that's like a few more belts.
Where's
and
blue?
I don't know, I can't remember. Like I just knew that it was like, it seemed like a long ways off. And so for me, I was like, I'm never, and I even said something to him. I think I kind of said like, I can't get ready for the kumite if I can't spar. You know, and again, 7-year-old logic.
Did he give you a look? Was he like,
oh yeah, dude, he's like dumb kid. Because I was like, I gotta fight in the kumite. So instead, what I did is me and my buddies, we would just go in the backyard and beat the crap out of each other. We would like set up fights. We'd have to fight each other, and the next day we'd come to school and we would have black eyes and busted fingers and everything else. I mean, because we were just fighting each other.
Yeah.
So stupid, but I mean, it's what we did, you know. And so again, you know, all that said, so then start getting into that. Then the UFC came out, right? 93. Meanwhile, I'm playing like Street Fighter 2, I'm playing Fatal Fury and all these fighting games. And so I'm like, yeah, like fighting, right? And then UFC came out. And then we got to see what that kind of stuff would look like in real life.
Yeah.
You're like, whoa, this is what this actually could look like.
What was the first UFC you saw?
UFC.
Mine was 6 because Oleg Taktarov, which I was a big fan of his.
I think so. I knew about the UFC because I remember like on the pay-per-view channel, they would talk about it on pay-per-view. But I think the first one I actually saw was UFC. I want to say it was UFC. I saw the first one on. We got it on VHS.
VHS, yeah.
Yeah, so like we rented it on VHS from the movie store. I remember I got that one and like, you know, saw Hoist Gracie and stuff like that, and then, you know, I was like, oh, that was crazy. Like, never saw that. And then it was UFC. Was it 3 or 2 when he fought Chemo?
Might have been because I know there was one that he didn't. Did he do 1, 2? I think he fought in 1, fought in 2, and then didn't fight in 3, and he fought in 4.
3, yeah, because Hoist.
I'm not sure.
Hoist, let's see, UFC 3.
I was just thinking back, you know, like, honestly, my first time me seeing like martial arts, like something cool, like I was thinking about like what was like a cool skill or a cool move that I saw that really was amazing to me. I think my dad saw the movie. I didn't see it. My dad saw the movie Karate Kid.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And so when the guy with the blonde hair does the spinning back kick to Daniel-san and like drops him. I think.
Yeah.
I remember my dad coming home and like telling me about the movie and doing the spinning back kick, and I was like, whoa, that's so cool. That's really a thing.
That's funny.
But I just remember just seeing that. I remember my dad doing it in his terrible form that he had. He never did any martial arts, but that was like maybe my first time like, ooh, like what martial arts is, because I remember I was young, but then I remember starting Taekwondo at like 6 or 7, and I think I started because it was just the thing to do. It wasn't like
everybody did
just
it.
Because it was the thing to do.
Yeah.
Like they just put me in it, and my parents kept me at the same level, like white belt, and people keep getting. I'm like, why am I not? They didn't want to spend the money because it costs like every belt costs money. We didn't have a lot of money back then.
Yeah.
So my brother, I don't know, maybe they thought I was like, oh, you can just do the same katas over and over. I still remember those katas to this day because I did them so many times. But yeah, I honestly, Bloodsport is probably for me because I remember watching that movie over and over. And then the UFC kind of came out, but I never really had my desire was not. I was always so like, oh my god, that's so unreachable. Like I never had desire. I was always kind of scared of confrontation.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you had kind of a totally different perspective on seeing. You're like, oh, I want to do that. I want to fight. I don't know. I never had that. I was always kind of like,
well, see, that's the way that I honestly, it's like something that it's a quality that I have where when I see people do something, I'm like, well, he did it. Well, I can do it.
yeah,
Maybe it won't be him, but I can do it. It's been done. So if I see something that's been done, then I'm like, okay, the path has been paved. I can do it. And at the time, back then, they would put the little thing that said that the movie was based on a true story.
Oh yeah, you believe that?
All right. So I believed it forever until like I read about Frank Dukes and realized he was like it was basically just made up stuff. But as a kid growing up, I thought it was a real thing. It's like, oh man, like there's guys that can do this. I've got to learn how to do this.
Right.
And so went to Taekwondo, and then that didn't work out. And then I saw the UFC. I was like, oh, the UFC's a thing. And then it was funny because it just kind of went away for a while. Like I would watch the UFCs from time to time, but even then I kind of lost track of it. And then I remember in high school when I got into wrestling, I started finding out about like Pride. Started finding out about that stuff. It was like that seed that was there that was planted as a kid playing Street Fighter 2, Fatal Fury, and like watching Bloodsport and all this stuff. That little seed sprouted.
Yeah.
Because then I'm like, I'm wrestling, so okay, I'm actually doing something that can lend itself to fighting, and I'm pretty good at it, right? So that was kind of a thing for me because then I was watching the UFC and Pride. And I'm like, man, these wrestlers are kicking ass. So I was like, I could use this wrestling to become a fighter as I wanted to be as a kid. And I was like, okay. And that's what led me to get into, grappling, because I was thinking, okay, like I was almost thinking about myself like as a fighting character. Okay, if I was a character in a fighting game, I would be almost like a pure grappler because I'm a wrestler, right? Okay, well, cool. Well, then I need to learn jiu-jitsu, right? I got to learn how to do jiu-jitsu because I've got to be able to submit people.
Yeah.
You know, and it's funny because even in my home, I had a heavy bag since I was like 13. I remember when I was 13 years old, I went and like I saved up a bunch of money from like cutting grass and stuff, and I got one of those. You remember those? They used to call them thrifty nickels. It was like a classified ads thing that they would have in like grocery stores.
I think so. They're like free, right?
It's free.
Free.
Just grab them.
Yeah.
And so I would call the people, and I bought a bunch of weight equipment. I spent about like $400 that saved up, and I bought like a weight set, and I bought a heavy bag with gloves and all that stuff, and I bought a whole thing of it. And and then I remember like that's what I bought. I remember for my 13th birthday, I was like, that's what I bought myself. You know, like my mom obviously helped out a little bit, but she didn't have a ton of money because we had sisters and stuff, but I'd saved up the money to get it. So I got that stuff, and I was like, yeah, I got a heavy bag. And so I was, always down there banging kicks and punching and stuff and making the house shake.
What was like, did you have, I was talking about like spinning back kick for me was like amazing. And I remember watching Bloodsport and watching him do the splits on the chair and like the meditation. I was like, oh my God, that's the coolest thing. What was there a move that you saw? I know the pec thing was, obviously, but was there like a move that you saw? You're like, whoa, this is amazing. Like
from Bloodsport?
Just any movie. Like, was there?
Around this time, whenever I got the movies and stuff, like the kicks and stuff, I always thought were cool because I couldn't kick. And then I remember as I got older, around the time I bought the heavy bag, I was I was 14, not 13. 14 years old when I bought all that stuff. When I was 14 years old, I was watching like these videos from K1. So because like I could find them online, they're hard to find back then because there was no YouTube. But I found like these videos of K1. So there was like Andy Hugh, looks like Andy Hug, but Andy Hugh, he was a Swiss guy, a Kyotian guy. And then there was like Ernesto Hoost and Peter Arts.
I like Jerome. Was it
Jerome Lebanner?
Lebanner. He was like French or something.
Yeah, French dude. He was a monster.
Dude, I used to love watching his knockout reel. Like it was the best. And he had this gnarly nose. His nose flat to the side. It was amazing.
But so I was watching those guys, and then I would just mimic whatever they were doing. I would throw these ugly like jab cross to like leg kick combos and stuff. Whatever. That's what I was doing. So I was doing that, and then I was wrestling, and then I was doing. We would beat each other up and down in my basement. We would like roll out the carpet and and move all the bed and stuff out of the way. And we had gloves that we bought. I'd bought like some of the MMA gloves and bought the Harbinger gloves. Remember those?
Yeah.
So you get the Harbinger. They were bag gloves, but you'd cut out the little thing out of the middle and you'd use them. Some of the old fighters back in the day used them.
They have like almost like a little hard piece.
It's like a little bar.
Yeah.
And then where you can clench your fist around.
Right.
So yeah, there's those. But what you would do is you'd cut that out and you could use them as gloves. Some of the old fighters used to use them. Some of the old original MMA gloves were based upon the Harbinger. Basically, they would just cut off the little finger tops and that kind of thing. But that's where like some of the original glove designs came from. The actual first guy, by the way, maybe this is fun like trivia, that actually used gloves in the UFC. Do you know who it was?
That used gloves? 2 gloves? I don't know.
2 gloves. Yeah,
one glove was
the first guy to use 2 gloves to fight.
I don't know.
Tank Abbott.
Was it really?
Yeah, he used some modified Kimpo gloves.
That's cool.
Yeah.
If you don't know who Tank Abbott is, go. So like the typical guy, like. We used to love watching him fight. It was the most, he'd like probably lose and he'd run out of gas. But man,
he won a lot of fights so early on.
He did, because if he clipped you, I remember he fought that huge guy.
The first guy, yeah.
And like folding him. Back then, like these dudes had bellies. Oh, yeah. Like it's not like you got Roy Nelson as like one guy that's kind of looks out of shape, and he's not even out of shape. But all those guys, man. It was just, I think it was really, and talk about being the Wild West, it was just so exciting because it was just so. It was so much more of a kind of like a freak show.
Oh, well, it was pure fighting. It was not like, some of these guys were not the most trained. They were making up fighting styles for these people. Like Tank Abbott was, his fighting style was dubbed pit fighting.
Yeah.
But he was a wrestler and boxed. Like that's what he'd done. He'd wrestled a bit and boxed, and they called it pit fighting because everybody had to have a fighting style, because you couldn't just be like a street fighter. But that's what he was a street fighter. Gary Goodrich, like he went and got an honorary black belt and like took Sikwon or something, some like martial art, and
they just gave it to him.
Yeah, they just gave it to him because he wore it into he wore their gi and represented their style when he went into his first fight.
Gotcha.
So when you watch Gary Goodrich's first fight, he was wearing a gi. And then, freaking Don Fry was grabbing it and punching him and stuff. Later on, he didn't wear it anymore. But originally, that's what he said he was.
You remember Tank Abbott? Like, did you ever see the video of him bench pressing?
Yeah, yeah.
Extremely strong.
Oh, super strong guy.
Very
Yeah,
strong.
big, strong dude, So yeah, it was an interesting time period, because you'd have just all over the place with the actual levels of skill and stuff. I mean, because then you started seeing guys like Morgie Smith come in, and who's an accomplished kickboxer. There was Vitor Belfort. You had Olympic, or you had world class wrestlers like Mark Coleman and stuff come in, and even
Mark Coleman, Mark Kerr,
Mark Schultz actually fought, who was a hell of a wrestler. He fought one fight against Gary Goodrich. I think it was UFC 9. He fought him, but getting back to it, so then start seeing this stuff, and then I'm like, okay, I can wrestle, and I can do jiu-jitsu, and I can fight. And then it was like this little seed of like wanting to do martial arts and wanting to be a fighter, like that. It was there again, And I there was a book that I was reading where it talks about this, and the guy talks about this idea of a seed, right? Where there's a seed in all of us, and that like a lot of the times where it's like stuff from our childhood, right? Kind of comes back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like to me, like looking at it, it's like, I mean, it makes no surprise to me, or it's no surprise to me that I end up becoming what I am because of how much I was into the stuff that I was when I was a kid. Like when I was a kid, I watched Bloodsport and all the martial arts movies.
Yeah.
I, loved big, strong guys, like pro wrestlers and stuff like that. I was just enamored with fighters. I mean, I used to, like play Street Fighter 2 and Fatal Fury and all these fighting games, and we would like dress up as them, and we would even play fight. Like I collected comic books and loved Wolverine and all the big guys with muscles. I mean, it's no surprise that that's what I ended up getting into, because like that was what I thought about all the time. And then when I got into high school, it just kind of popped back in because I was wrestling, and I was like, oh, I'm kind of doing this already. If maybe I can keep doing this. Yeah. And that's kind of what led me there. But I think, I make no joke about it. Like Bloodsport was a big one because that was like what planted the seed into this idea of this ability to fight and do this. And then the UFC made that a real possibility, right? Because before the Bloodsport was there, and there was no, no one knew what it was, right? But then you had the UFC come out and all these other MMA organizations, and it's like, it's the real deal. It's the real thing.
Did you have, like, honestly, did you really have aspirations? Like, you wanted to fight, like, in the UFC? Was that, like, were you like, this is what I want to do?
When I was younger, yeah. So, like, when I was younger, I remember, like, one of my senior projects for high school. It was just kind of an end-of-the-year project. It was just something fun to do for English class that the teacher had us doing. But it was, like, tell us what life's going to look like in 10 years. And I wrote down, like, the rankings for the UFC, and I was like, I was in one of them. You know what I mean? Like, I remember I had like Robbie Lawler and stuff, all this stuff. And obviously, as I got older, that really became not really what I was after. It changed.
Why?
I ended up falling in love more with jiu-jitsu and being a martial artist rather than being a fighter, and it just wasn't there. It's like it was fun to do. But then when I got into it, I was like, I kind of like just doing this more, I like competing in jiu-jitsu. I like doing jiu-jitsu. I don't necessarily enjoy the fighting as much. It's fun to do. I'm glad that I did it. But
what don't you, is there anything specifically I know we talked about before, the atmosphere, like jiu-jitsu is a little bit different than MMA. MMA is a little bit more kind of,
generally jiu-jitsu has a more friendly atmosphere.
Yeah, but again, like, was there anything particular that you didn't love so much about fighting? I mean, obviously, nobody likes getting hit in the head and stuff, but what was it about that?
So here's what happened. So my buddy Sam, his name's Sam Yang, he did this thing where he basically quit his job and went across country doing jiu-jitsu. He just quit his job. He had some money saved up, and he gym hopped from California all the way up to here.
What year was this?
2008.
Pretty kind of, when gyms are still kind of like, who are you, what do you want?
Yeah, so, I mean, well, this time wasn't too bad back then, it wasn't quite, if it would have been about 5 years before, probably would have been more like that, but 2008 was a pretty okay time, but he basically stopped at all kinds of gyms along the way, stopped up and stayed with me for a couple of weeks, then went down to Florida, came back up, and then went to New York, came back, stayed with me for about another week, and then came back. And again, he stopped at all kinds of different places, everything from ATT to Lovato's gym to Danaher's, back before anybody knew who Danaher was, and anyway, so he was doing this trek, and he trained with me for 2 weeks. And I remember I had accumulated, at the time I was working a corporate job, and I accumulated all of this overtime, or not overtime, but paid time off. I enjoyed the job at the time, so I didn't use it. I was just like, why do I want to pay time off? I'm working and I'm making money, so who cares? But I had my buddy in town, so I took off like 2 weeks. And him and I just hung out and did jiu-jitsu and hung out. It was fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember afterwards, I had to get ready for a fight right after he left. And so that meant I couldn't train jiu-jitsu as much as I wanted to anymore. I had to go back to doing boxing.
Yeah.
You just have to disperse things. And it was at that point that I was like, man, I love training jiu-jitsu. And I hate that every time I have to get ready for a fight, my jiu-jitsu has to get a little worse because I have to put more time and effort towards boxing and kickboxing. I always would box and stuff, but not with the same intensity and the same focus that I had to do for a fight. It's just a different situation where, like, when a jiu-jitsu match is coming up, I'm excited. You know, it's so much fun. It's something I look forward to. It still gets the nerves going, but I have fun with it. Fights was much more nerve-wracking.
Sure.
And I just didn't enjoy seeing my jiu-jitsu get worse. That was the big one. That's kind of where I knew, like, this one means more to me than this one does. And I ended up fighting for a few more years just because I wanted to at least fight a couple pro fights, and also at the time I felt I had to fight to promote the gym, you know. And so I continued to fight till 2012. But in 2008, I knew it was like this was not it. Like, 'cause at this point, 2008, I'd been fighting for 2 years. I think I had six or seven fights at this point. But it was at that time that I was like, yeah, this isn't for me.
How did you continue on, like, knowing it's not what you wanted to do? Like, just knowing that it was, because I mean, it's hard. Like, especially in MMA.
Yeah.
Like, if you're kind of not all in, you could, you know. I mean, you were extremely skilled. I remember the first time seeing you fight was at that. You know, I've talked about this before, but seeing you at that casino or whatever, like Indiana, I think, because we had some guys, you know, when I was at Highland, we had some guys fighting. So we were there, and we kind of knew of you.
Yeah.
And you just, like, steamrolled the guy. And I was like, holy shit. That dude's terrifying.
Yeah.
And, I mean, because you were killing people. You were really, I mean, you're doing well.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Like, I mean, you just keeping that intensity up and keeping that you know, that drive to, I mean, because you really have to, I mean, the consequences are a lot more severe, you know, in an MMA fight.
Sometimes you do what you got to do, right? So at the time, I felt like I had to do it because, well, first off, I wanted to fight that pro fight because I was like, I wanted to fight some pro fights. So, like, I knew that I wasn't going to do it forever, but I still wanted to fight some pro fights. In 2008, I knew I wasn't fighting in the UFC. I just knew. I was like, it's not happening, because I was like, I don't want it that bad, but I still wanted to fight a little bit. You know, I wasn't done yet, if that makes sense. It's like you kind of know that there's a shelf life on this thing.
Okay.
Whereas when you're in it, sometimes it's like you can't see that. You're just like, I'm fighting. That's what I'm doing. I knew there was a shelf life. I knew that I wasn't going to go that deep on it, but I kind of wanted to continue exploring it. You know, I wasn't done with it yet. I just knew that I wasn't into it as much as jiu-jitsu. And so, you know, and also at the same time, I did feel a responsibility. Like in 2009, when I did that fight, I was one of the main coaches at the gym.
Yeah.
And I felt a certain level of responsibility, because we had younger fighters training with us, to lead. And I felt the responsibility to, you know, represent my coaches and promote the gym and stuff like that through the fighting. And so, you know, again, sometimes you just bear the burden and you just do it, you know. And so that's what you did. I mean, in 2012, that fight that I had, the last one, that was 100% like promotion of the gym. And you know, and just with that one was, honestly, that one was like a test to myself. And I remember my mom had passed the year before, so I was like, I even said to myself, I'm gonna do like one more of these damn fights, and I'm gonna sort of, it sounds so stupid and cliche, but I'm gonna dedicate. I didn't say anything to anybody else. It was completely with me. I'm gonna dedicate my performance to her, you know, and that's what I'm gonna do. And so that's what I went into the fight to do, and I did that and won the fight, and I trained my butt off for that fight.
Is that 185?
185.
185. God, I can't believe you used to get down to 185.
Yeah.
But that was also, what, you know, 8 years ago?
Yeah, and I mean,
you feel like your frame is different now. I mean,
not necessarily. If you look at my weight, because, like, well, for instance, when I fought at the casino, I was about 223.
Yeah.
I walked at that time about 225. I was actually bigger back then because I was just lifting heavy and eating food like crazy. And then I just realized that my weight, if I was going to do a couple pro fights, my weight wasn't very good. I wasn't a very big 205er, so I dropped down. You know, I started to basically just do a lot of cardio and slim the muscle down, and then got down to where I was like walking around 205, you know, or so for 85. And then after the fighting was done, I was like, let's start gaining some weight again. I'd rather be a little bigger. I don't have the desire to maintain a 225 weight anymore. I could do it easily, but it's a lot of work for food wise, and I'd rather just kind of feel healthier at about 210. Plus, I don't want to go up to ultra heavy. I'd rather be somewhere in like super.
What
heavy.
do you compete at now? What do you compete at?
Super heavy, which is 221 in the gi and under, or
So you got to be like what 216,
215 without the gi. Yeah. No, I mean my gi only weighs maybe like 4 pounds or something.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't. I always go in. I end up being a lot. Always go under. I always end up being in my gi. I usually weigh like 215, whatever.
Dude, it's making me. It's giving me like. It's getting me all like revved up. I'm like, kind of you're talking about. Just starts to remember.
Oh yeah.
I just remember like weighing in like before like an IBJJF or something. Like it's just. I miss that.
I know.
A little bit.
I miss that stuff, man. I miss being able to get out there and do it.
Yeah. So, what was a video game? Do you love? I've got a video game in mind that I know was my favorite, and it was there's two I would say: Mortal Kombat, and then Street Fighter 2.
Yeah,
I remember like getting.
Who was your favorite character in those?
Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat was Sub-Zero.
Okay,
and Street Fighter was I think Ryu.
Okay,
what about you?
Ryu in Street Fighter 2. And then in what was it in Mortal Kombat I played a little bit. I wasn't as big of a fan of that. I was a Scorpion fan in Mortal Kombat.
Okay.
And then I played Fatal Fury a lot too. And in Fatal Fury my favorite character was Joe Higashi.
Fatal Fury. I think I played
it. It was kind of like a knockoff of like Street Fighter 2.
Tekken was a pretty cool one too. I like the little Bruce Lee character guy.
Yeah,
There's one that was like Bruce Lee.
I never liked
really?
Tekken.
I
didn't like I liked the 2D side scroller type thing.
Yeah.
And I didn't get into like the whole 3D thing and like I remember playing it in like with the 2D fighters that were so much more crisp as far as like the controls.
Yeah.
Like you press a button and they throw a punch, whereas like Tekken there always seemed like, especially in the early ones, there was like this lag where like and like it was just like I don't know, the controls are kind of funky.
Most people don't know what we're talking about. They have like these like 3 buttons. I remember.
No, dude, like the oh, you're talking about
like back in the day, they had like 3 buttons. Like
the
Sega
arcade?
Genesis had like 3 buttons.
Sega Genesis had 3 buttons,
And then
so the Sega Genesis was funny because if you had 3 buttons, and then if you wanted to switch between kicks and punches, you had to press the select button, or you had to get the turbo controller. And then I remember playing like Street Fighter 2 at the arcade.
Yeah.
Like I didn't play. I don't think we had Street Fighter 2, but we had Street Fighter 2 like Turbo or something, like the upgraded version. But that was at the arcade, and buddies and we would go up to the street and play at the arcade and beat the crap out of each other and see who would
they don't have
win.
arcades anymore anywhere.
They do.
Well, they have the like rec bar, but
Well, there's one called it's called like Round something. It's out in Jefferson Mall.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's like they serve beer and stuff. Basically, because again, like people from our generation, it's like an adult thing. It's like the kids now are not going to go to arcades because they're like, I'm just going to play it online. But like people from our generation,
it's fun.
It was fun. Arcades were a blast. So they've made these adult arcades where like if people can go back and play games and stuff like that and have a drink. But they have a few of them now.
So martial arts movies was which actor was there an actor that you had that maybe inspired? He was the one.
John Claude was badass. Obviously I liked Bolo Young and his stuff, but John Claude Van Damme and all the movies like that, and there was Lionheart, Double Impact. Good. All the movies were so good.
Bloodsport, your favorite Jean Claude Van Damme movie?
Bloodsport is my favorite Jean Claude. It's my favorite martial arts movie.
Is it?
Yeah, because I
don't know what my favorite one is.
When I say martial arts movie, by the way, I'm talking about like some of those old like whatever. I mean, in hell, they kind of just redo them now because like they had like Never Back Down, which was like
the MMA version.
Yeah, that was like Karate Kid meets MMA because it's the same movie. Like it's like new guy comes to town, hangs out with the girl. Boyfriend beats him up, realizes he has to learn how to fight, goes and learns from a teacher who's a little bit mysterious, a little bit whatever, starts learning how to do it, and fights the guy at the very end in a final fight. It was the same damn movie.
It's always the same movie.
Not necessarily. I mean, like, what is it? Bloodsport wasn't the same movie.
Well, yeah. Well, but he did get he has got to get the girl.
Well, of course he has to get the girl.
I remember my dad and I watching Bruce Lee movies. Enter the Dragon, obviously.
Yeah, that's a good one.
But there was one with him and Chuck Norris, and they fight each other. I was this is awesome.
Yeah,
that was an amazing.
But they fight each other in like the Coliseum.
Yeah, and then but Chuck Norris had this like insane chest hair.
Oh yeah,
he was awesome. Chuck Norris, I used to love all of his movies. See, they weren't like really martial arts movies, but they were like
action movies.
Yeah, like I don't know, it was the one where he's like a Navy SEAL or something.
I don't think I've seen really any of his movies.
Did you ever used to watch Walker, Texas Ranger?
Oh, yeah,
I used to watch it with my grandparents.
Tight ass pants,
dude. He was just. There was a scene where he fought like some MMA guys or something.
Okay.
He did some jiu-jitsu in it.
Oh, speaking of which, here is a fantastic. If you guys are listening, here's a fantastic gem that you should go watch. So there is a movie called The Brazilian Brawl.
No, not at all.
Oh, dude, it's good.
Tell me more, Chewy.
So I remember when my buddy Chris and I first started training, our coach told us about this movie called The Brazilian Brawl. We couldn't find it anywhere, right? We couldn't find it until Netflix became a thing, because it's such an obscure movie, and nobody had it. But it stars the Machado brothers.
Okay.
Oh, dude, it's so good. So basically, the Machado brothers, they're like their uncle Dana DeSanto. He's like a martial arts guy, right?
Okay.
He like, these guys are trying to take his land from him, and then they like blow him up or something to kill him. They know who killed him. And there's this whole fight scenes and stuff. And I remember, like, you see some jiu-jitsu. There's some flying arm bars in there and all that stuff. But my favorite scene, my absolute most favorite scene is, like, somehow when they blow up Grandpa's home and kill him, they go down and he has, like, a weapons cache. And I mean, just, like, any weapon. So they're pulling out, like, automatic, like, rifles.
Yeah.
And like... one of them like has like he's holding like double 45s at his side, like there's this scene where like it has the brothers and they're facing down at the ground, and the camera is like facing like you can see like the top of their head, and then they look up, and then it makes it's almost like those promos for football games and stuff. And then it shows them they're putting on like war paint, like green camo style paint, like they're in Predator or something, or some like Navy SEAL from Vietnam. And then then it flips over and they're walking down a hill, just shooting guns, just like pop, 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 just shooting at everything. It's the most.
It's like Rambo kind of.
It's like Rambo in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in B movie style. It's fantastic, and it has a great theme song.
Oh God, we're gonna have to listen to that. I did want to ask you. I think we've talked about this. Yeah. Do you have a favorite like actual documentary, martial arts documentary?
Documentary.
Yeah, I love. I love the one with Mark Kerr.
Smashing Machine.
Yeah,
Smashing Machine was a good
and then
one.
The one with Henzo was probably my favorite.
Was it Legacy?
Legacy, and then Choke is with Hickson. Mm-hmm. Mark Kerr was a tough one, man, to watch.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I was a big Mark Kerr fan.
Yeah, and like watching him struggle with drugs and stuff was crazy.
Man, I don't know that I have a favorite one. I mean, like, there's some I like. I mean, there were back in the day, you had all these obscure like documentaries. There was another one called like Rites of Passage, and it followed 4 different fighters. At the time, it was like Randleman, Eugene Jackson, this one dude that was fighting in Brazil, and then it was I think it was they were following like some of the guys from the old Red Devil team, like from the Russians,
Yeah.
But
I think it was
Andre something.
Well, Emelianenko was like Red Devil.
No, it wasn't.
Was he Red Devil?
He was, but it wasn't. It was before him. There was a guy named Andre something, and then there was another guy like, I don't know what his name was, but basically like. But it was just showing these different aspects of fighting. It was a neat thing to see. But as far as my favorite, man, like. I don't know.
Do you have one that like inspired you more than? I don't know. I just really loved watching. I just loved watching that one with Hickson or not Hickson. I'm sorry. I loved the one with Hickson too, but with Henzo because he's just such a badass.
I would say I like if like from the MMA sort of genre and stuff that I was watching. Obviously, Henzo's was really cool because that one was like you saw a dude that was fighting a lot and. It was really cool to see, like, for instance, Mark Kerr, you see him fight, but you see him go down this really dark path, and it sucks because, it sucks to see. Then there's, like the Rites of Passage thing was, like, it was kind of short, but look at these different fighters.
Yeah.
And Choke was cool. Like, Choke is cool, but Choke's like the typical Hickson stuff where it's like this, it's so, like, there's just so much mystique because this dude is, like, he's like the Zen master of jiu-jitsu, right? He's like under waterfalls in cold water, and he's like, stretching his neck out and making his. I mean, that one
he's
is
doing the breathing and
breathing
all that
exercise.
Like I think as far as like during that era, obviously, you know, and this is not new information, he was probably one of the most the talented, maybe, but he was physically talented and skill wise. I mean, I think he had it all.
Yeah.
And it was
absolutely.
just, it was really amazing.
He was a badass. I loved his podcast with Joe Rogan where he's like telling stories. Because it's like that's a side you never got to hear about. Like, you know, like when he said he was like, you know, like some guys were dojo storming or something, and he hopped on the back of a moped in his underwear, and he like goes down there to take care of business.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? I thought that was just, to me, it's like it's such a human story. Whereas like, you know, in Choke and stuff like that, he's this like mythical unicorn that like is so disciplined and everything else. It's just like, I don't know. It's just one of those things where I like seeing one of the things I like seeing is I love seeing 3-dimensional views of people and seeing the human aspect of them because, you know, especially if it's someone that, for me, if I look up to them, it's like, okay, they're human. If they're human, that means I can do this.
Right.
You know,
connect with them a little more.
Yeah,
easily.
Exactly. It's like, it's like, cause I can aspire to that, right? Because I can see like steps and I can see that they have flaws and things like that, just like anybody else.
Right.
In Choke, it's like, there is no flaws. This is a guy who's trained himself to be the ultimate fighting machine with jiu-jitsu, right?
And then he like literally, you know, the most badass part was like at the end, Yuki Kondo, and he's like, I didn't want to punch him. Basically, he's like, I just choked him because I didn't want to hurt him anymore.
Yeah, because he's got his out.
But Yuki Kondo, man, oh my god, like his eye was all just, that's his name.
Yuki,
I think it's
Yuki Nakai.
Nakai, sorry.
Yuki Kondo Kondo's a big dude.
Well, that's the wrong name.
Nakai.
Okay, but his like orbital was just completely
because that dude was like freaking like gouging.
He fought like a big guy, right?
Well, he fought Gerard Gordeau.
Oh, that's right.
And he was gouging his eye. Yeah.
And he was like a tiny dude.
Yeah, he's not a big dude. You know, but Nakai ended up going on to becoming like one of the first jiu-jitsu black belts, Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belts in like Japan. Yeah. Because he founded like his own school and everything else, and so.
Yeah, he was legit.
Yeah, all those dudes back then, like in the old days of fighting,
when they fought like 3 times in a night. And
I mean, the fights weren't as tough because you didn't have the level of skill, but it's just one of these things where all those dudes were like, it's in the Wild West.
Yeah.
Nobody knows it's going to happen, right? Like the very first UFC fight, I remember reading a book called The Evolution of NHB. They were talking about, you know, when Gerard Gordeau fought Taylor Tully and kicked him, and basically like teeth flew out into the crowd. There was like Gold's Gym was going to like partner up with the UFC to promote cross training with martial arts, and that tooth lands in their table, and they're like, "We're out." Like,
did you see the ref?
Oh
like,
yeah.
Do you remember? Like, I remember I would watch that part, and I'd watch the ref, and the ref was like, "Oh my god." He's like looking like, he's like, "What do I do?" Like, do you keep going? Like, I mean, it's just it was so raw, and it was like just completely didn't know what to expect.
Right, and those dudes signed up for that. You know, like that's crazy. Like, because those dudes signed up for something that nobody knew. Like, they literally thought it was going to be blood sport, right? Because like they said that like once they saw like the guy get his teeth kicked out, they're like, oh, this is real.
Yep.
This is real. Like, and so yeah, you know, again, there's a massive amount of respect for those dudes, you know, at that time because they were doing some crazy stuff.
Yeah, and then the weight classes and
there were no weight
time.
Classes.
No time limits.
I mean, you'd have sumo wrestlers versus a guy who's like 200 pounds lighter fighting with karate. You know, like you had Keith Hackney versus
groin shots.
Oh my gosh,
the dude was like basically like kicking him. He almost opened the gate thing and like pushed. He tried to lift. Who's the guy that tried to get lifted? They tried to lift the guy out.
Well, so Tank Abbott tried to lift the dude out.
Yeah.
But when Keith Hackney was fighting, Emmanuel Yarborough.
Yeah, big dude.
He like clipped him over the head with a friggin' like chop, and then they went barreling out of the cage and they broke the latch.
Yeah.
So.
So crazy.
Yeah, but I mean, it's different time. But so again, all that stuff to me, man, was inspiring watching as a kid. Like when I was watching that stuff, I was like, I want to fight. I want to be a martial artist. That's what I want to do. And even now, it's like it's one of those things where it still excites me. It's one of those things where, like, it's like I'm so hot or cold with stuff. I can't like. I don't know. But I mean, I guess it's with everyone, right? I can't artificially manufacture some sort of like excitement for something, right? But with martial arts, I've always wanted to be one. Mm-hmm. It was always exciting to me. Like it seemed like the coolest thing ever. You know, like if someone was like, "Hey, Chewy, would you rather be like if someone was asking me if I could have the choice, if I would still want to be a martial artist now, or if I would want to be like I don't know, just like a lawyer or something that makes a lot of money, or just any profession that makes a lot of money, opposed to like, granted, I don't do bad. I do all right for myself, right? I actually do better than most, but just another profession, I'd be like, I want to be a martial artist. Like I dreamt about this damn stuff since I was a kid. Yeah. And I would have. That's what I wanted to do, you know. And I've been thinking about that recently because I'm like, man, like that's what I always thought about doing. There was nothing that nothing kept coming back at me since I was a kid other than that. I wanted to be a fighter. I wanted to be a martial artist. I wanted to do that. And, you know.
I had a hard time visualizing myself as a martial artist. I remember being even, you know, after I've been training for a while and, you know, I was a purple belt and like, you know, thinking to myself, am I a martial artist? And I remember just standing there and looking at the other people that were competing and I was like, am I supposed to be here?
Yeah.
Do I belong here? I'm like, so I was always kind of somebody that injuries kind of freaked me out. Maybe I wanted to be a physical therapist for that reason. I don't know. Like I was always scared to get injured and like I couldn't imagine, you know, getting punched and a lot of it was like, what would my parents say? You know, what would they think? You know, even when I started jiu-jitsu, they're like, you're going to hurt your hands. You're going to mess your hands up. And you're not going to be able to work. And then you're going to, you know, whatever. And I was just like, well, and I struggled with that for quite some time. You know, like, am I really going to, you know, move forward with jiu-jitsu? But just something pulled me in and I kept at it. And, you know, I've had plenty of finger injuries and hand injuries. And, you know, arm injuries, and I've had to go to work one-handed, and I would do it again. You know, I think it's worth it. Like I don't know. So for me I was kind of always freaked out about getting injured, and I never imagined that I would be doing this thing. So for me, like I was just like, I always thought it was unattainable. Yeah. And being able to do jiu-jitsu and you know, actually be a part of that, I think for me was like, first time I remember my first jiu-jitsu class, I was like smiling because I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. Like, this is so cool. Like, this is what I've seen on TV, you know? And, I don't know. I just wanted to do it just because I thought it was interesting, but I never imagined that I would stick with it or, you know, continue on. And I don't know what it was about that for me that made me keep going. I just kind of kept showing up. Yeah. Maybe part of it was like Adam. You know, Adam like came in
because you and Adam
came in together. Yeah, I maybe started like a week or two before he did because I think he had cut his eyebrow or he was at a concert. This is a funny story about Adam. So we went to a concert and he was crowd surfing and he got dropped.
Oh shit!
And I see him pull up. I see him pop up. I saw him in the crowd and he pops up and he starts looking around. I see him coming to me and I'm like, somebody spill like pink Kool-Aid or red stuff, like a drink on his shirt, and he was like, his eye was just like bleeding. So he had to go get it, like, actually they super glued it, and then he had to go back and get it stitched back up at another time because they didn't fix it right. But so he was gonna start jiu-jitsu, and so he had to wait a couple of weeks for I don't know how long for that to heal. So yeah, I think maybe part of it because me and him kind of just came in together, and we're always kind of had that friendly, you know, just kind of motivation. Because again, you know, when we switched gyms, it was like me and him were like, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? You know? And so we kind of came to Derby City together, and part of that was, you know, because we started training. So I think maybe part of the reason why I stuck with it is
having like, a battle buddy.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, battle buddies. Like I'm working on a book. It's basically about surviving like the first couple of years of jiu-jitsu and training. Yeah. And like one of the things I put in that book is get a battle buddy. Because like one of the things that helped me out early on was I have a friend that I mean we at the time we lived together, but even when we didn't live together, we trained together. Yeah. And having that friend that you could constantly depend on and that you would kind of feel accountable towards or whatever. Or even that you were competitive with, you know, you're like, oh, it's my buddy. I'm gonna try to beat my buddy or whatever. Yeah. You know, there's that friendly competition amongst it. Like that helps. That makes a big difference. And if you look, I think it did. And a lot of times when I look at students, a lot of times I see the students that tend to stick around for a long time. They typically come in pairs of 2s or 3s, right? It's like that's interesting. There's a small group that kind of clicks with each other, and they end up being like things like Justin and Nick Pabone. It's a great example, right? There, you have. Back in the day, it was Embry and Albright. You know, you have you and Adam. Back in the day, it was me and Chris. Colin and Kyle Cannon back in the day, my old coaches.
It's kind of interesting.
You know, there's a lot of them like that where basically you find your buddy, that's your battle buddy, right? And then that's who works together. Back in the day, Spartan and Kendrick, when they first started, they were going with each other. I mean, that's a lot of, that's like one of the I think one of the keys.
That's really interesting.
It's finding your battle buddy to where you can kind of feed off of each other and push one another. Because if you can find that, and sometimes it comes in bigger groups, it doesn't have to be 2s. But I think that making sure that you belong in that's a big thing.
Yeah. You know? No, I think that's you know, think about being accountable in working out or going to the gym or anything like that. You know, I think that's a great point, man. And I think it does. You feel like, well, I don't want them to get way ahead of me. I don't want them to get really good and then they're going to whoop my ass all the time.
So
like I want
to the gym.
Keep up. So and you know, for a while there, like you know, I was right before our old gym closed. Adam kind of consistently trained, and I was like out in Owensboro doing. I trained a little bit at
student PD school.
Yeah, and I trained a little bit at Nice Guy out there, which was awesome. They were great. Got introduction to leg locks and Joe Bays.
That's what they do.
I'll never forget it. Joe thing was a black belt at the time already. And he did like a cartwheel or something. Like he like rolled into an ankle lock. And I was like, what the hell? Like literally like 10 seconds. And I was like, he saw that I was like a new guy. He's like, I'm going to roll with him. And, you know, I was fine. I held my own with most of the people that were like a white belt level. But like Joe just made me look like an idiot.
Yeah, he's a monster.
It was just so crazy. And I remember it's been a few years since him and I rolled. He was at our gym, and like it was just like, this isn't fun. It's just like, oh, ankle lock.
Yeah, he's a monster.
It's so interesting, you know. I know we're getting on a tangent as always, but like just people's specialties, they get so good at this little niche in jiu-jitsu. It's like just watching them, and he had a submission underground. I think he just won recently, which is kind of cool. But yeah, it's fun. It's fun. Jiu-jitsu's so fun. I just miss it.
I know.
We'll be there.
We'll be back soon.
We'll be back.
All right, guys. So I hope you enjoyed that podcast. I'm going to do my promos better this time. Hi, thank you. I hope you enjoyed listening to the Chewjitsu podcast with Eugene and Chewy. If you would like to say 50...
This is terrible. This is so bad.
That's what I feel like most people... Like, this is the beautiful part about actually, like, either wearing or using or whatever the products that I have. It's like, again, I can talk off the cuff about them because I actually like them. It's not like I'm just like, hi, would you like to buy a game that I don't even really like? Well, then you should go to this person's website. So guys, that's I don't know. So what I'm talking about, guys, is I get a lot of games. Like there was this one, it was some block app. It was an app for blocks on the internet. They were like, hey there, we think you would be a great fit for our product. I'm like, it's a block game. It's like it's some sort of weird Tetris ripoff. Like what about me and my sort of listenership do you think would make sense for that? It makes no sense. So I'm not going to sell that stuff. It's silly, right? I don't care about the blocks. I care about stuff that's going to help you either look good, feel good, or entertain you, period. So with that said, let's talk about our real sponsors. You can go to charlottesweb.com and you can save 15% on your order with the promo code Chewjitsu, 15% off. Seriously, it's good stuff. Like, if you've ever been interested in trying CBD, I can't encourage people enough to do it. It's literally been, I mean, I think I can say this with all like reasonable. It's been a life changer for me in some ways because literally just some of the things as far as with the sleep and anxiety and things like that, it's been such a helpful tool to have into the mix with that stuff. It's been a game changer. So I encourage anybody to try CBD. Now, again, everybody's a little different. So I've seen people where they get the same response that I do. And some people are like, I didn't really feel anything. So again, I encourage people to try it out. If you want to try something out, you can go to their website and use that promo code and, check it out. And again, my buddy over at Epic Roll BJJ, Matt, he is making all sorts of different related jiu-jitsu gear, everything from gis to cool t-shirts to rash guards, the whole thing. So you can check his stuff out at epicrollbjj.com. Again, the promo code is jiu-jitsu. And then again, if you guys want to, get early access to the podcast, if you want to get the video versions of all these episodes, and you want to get a bunch of cool episodes or a bunch of cool content that has never been released anywhere else on the internet other than this one place, you can go to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast, and you can join our Patreon for less than $0.25 a day. And if you'd like to get my emails, my Monday through Friday emails plus some free resources, check out jiu-jitsu.net and you can do that as well. So guys, with that said, I hope you had a good time with us today, and talk to you guys next week.